Welcome back to the Pit Stop Sojourner. We've come a long way, but we still have so much more ahead of us. In today's video, I want to comment on something, right? And it was actually inspired by one of my favorite artists, Jack Harlow, as you would have seen in the topic in the title. In one of his songs, right, the song is titled Is That It? And it's the fourth track on the album Jackman. In one of his verses, he goes on to say, "You're telling yourself it just takes time, but the time is now. Stop waiting for the inspiration." Obviously, I know I'm not really, singing it in its correct rhythm and melody. I'm just using the lyrics as they are. But just to repeat that, you're telling yourself it just takes time, but the time is now. Stop waiting for the inspiration. The reason that I really appreciate this line or two is because as much as we can wait and hope for that perfect timing, that perfect moment, I'll tell you now for free, it will never come. You can't wait for the perfect moment. Why? Because the power lies with you to create that moment for yourself. A perfect moment doesn't exist. You have the power to create it for yourself. You have the power to see an opportunity and seize it and make something out of it, right? And why am I mentioning all of this? Reason being, there gets a point where there's a fine line between knowledge and experience. Having enough knowledge to go ahead and do something versus having enough experience to get a certain amount of knowledge back from that. And as we delve into this video, I'll unravel more of what that's about, okay? The first thing that I want to look at is, if you want to improve on something, the only way to improve on something that you want to get better at, you're not even going to believe me, but it's to do the thing itself, right? Say I wanted to improve in cycling. As much as I could, I'm trying to think of something similar to cycling. As much as I could go to the gym, I can focus on leg exercises, I can train my hamstrings, my quads, my calves. As much as I can do all of these things, this might contribute to my cycling. It might give me more strength to push further. It might help with my endurance. However, unless I do something that involves a cycle bike itself, unless I simulate the experience that I want to get better at, I won't improve in cycling, or at least not as drastically as I would like to. If I don't incorporate some sort of cycle mechanism, I'm not going to improve. Why? Because there are certain techniques that are required. Yes, I could have the best quads ever, I could have the best legs ever, but if I don't have that cycling experience, I don't have those necessary techniques, and I won't be able to go far in that. Okay? Another example could be, say, driving. We've all been there. We've all learned how to drive. If you don't have your license in 2025, I'm telling you now, you need to lock in and go get your license. But yeah, we've all been there. We've all learned how to drive. And, as much as we would have learned from the K53 book or whatever book you might have used, or all these special learning driving apps, you could have, we would have learned all the rules of the road, and we would have had that down, and we would have learned all the different objects and tools in the car and what they do. But until you actually get into the driver's seat, until you get behind the steering wheel, you're not going to improve in driving. Let me give you this example, right? Say this. Say you were my passenger, and I had to fly you on a plane. And I came to you and I told you, my fellow passenger, or not my fellow passenger, I'm the pilot. But I'll tell you, listen here, right? I've gone and read 1,000 books in terms of learning how to fly a plane. But the one down part though, just like a minor issue, is I actually haven't been in the cockpit myself. Are you going to trust me to be your pilot, knowing that I haven't been in the cockpit itself and I don't have that flying experience? No. And the reason you won't trust this is, regardless of all this knowledge that I've gained, Experience is what will take us further in the end. Knowledge is valuable, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you need to be able to execute. You need experience. Okay? And this is why, when it comes to the whole dynamic between knowledge versus experience, when it comes to certain, like, let me tie this all back, right? I first mentioned that if you want to get better at something that you want to improve in, you have to do the thing itself. The reason why that holds is because as much knowledge as you can gain, you need to get that experience for itself. You need to gain that experience. You can't like develop much further from that. And don't get me wrong, this can be quite daunting and intimidating, especially when you want to improve or get better at something that you have to do in public, that you have to do in front of an audience, right? If I wanted to get better at comedy and I wanted to do stand-up comedy, as much as I can, rehearse my lines in front of the mirror or in front of a small group of people, my close friends and family, I'm not gonna get the same experience as one would get if they were to do the same thing in front of a crowd. Because also, the crowd itself is gonna give me feedback. And this brings me to my next topic of you need to practice in public. This sounds quite strange. Why would you say you need to practice in public? Aren't you supposed to practice behind the scenes? And then once you own your craft, you then get better and then you can showcase that in a public setting. True, yes. But for some things, you actually need to practice in public. In fact, it'll do you more good than harm. And the reason that is because when you practice in public, you get responsive feedback. If you have thick enough skin to handle the criticism, that responsive feedback will do you justice. You'll be able to learn from the flaws that you might have that you might not even have been able to see for yourself. Obviously, you can understand why that's very beneficial. Okay? Going back though to the initial quote that Jack Harlow had mentioned of waiting for the perfect moment. I'm gonna give you an image, okay? And this image, I got it from, it was the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think his name is Robert. I can't remember his last name and I don't want to butcher it. But Mr. Roberts, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, he goes on to say that, waiting for the perfect moment is similar to planning out a trip, a small journey. Let's say a 10-minute journey, okay? Planning out a trip and waiting for all the lights to be green from your starting point to the final destination. You're waiting for all the lights to be green before you actually begin the journey itself. Can you see how narrow of a window you have if that was the case? Or even if that case is possible to begin with. It might be the chances are very slim, but you get what I'm trying to say. The best way to learn is by incorporating some form of application with it. We learn better and we retain the information better when we actually get to practice what we're learning, when we get to implement some of the, the principles that we're looking into, right? And now, to tie this all off, I just want to give you 2 more images, okay? Or let me say 2 more concepts that I want to look into. With this whole thing of practicing in public, it can be quite daunting. But if you want to go ahead and still, carry on with it further, I would tell you this. You don't have to be perfect. Pay attention to this quote, right? The display of the creation of art is art in itself. And this is a quote that I got from the book. Again, I can't remember the author's name, but the book was titled Show Your Work. It was a yellow small book, very short book. You can finish it in a day. But the book was titled Show Your Work. And in this book, it goes on to say, it covers multiple aspects, but one of the key things that I took away from it was you can document your work, and that in itself is you having something to show for your efforts, right? a lot of times, right, like with the same analogy I said of practicing in public and showing some final product in the end, a lot of times we expect to just improve and then only show our improved self. But if you document your work, that in itself is something that people will appreciate. Why? Because a lot of times people don't have that access into the behind the scenes. Picture an artist, and this is the same analogy that they use in the book, right? Picture an artist. They paint some famous masterpiece, or they paint like an amazing masterpiece. It's breathtaking. As much as we can admire and appreciate that final masterpiece that they took the time to paint, wouldn't it also be quite interesting to see how they came along to have designed this? From how they started with that initial white blank canvas, to then see how they layered the different paint textures, why they chose certain colors over another, what vision they were trying to bring about, and how they actually came to bring that about. And this is actually quite funny. It reminds me of it was back in the day. It was Bob Ross. Yeah, Bob Ross. I'm not sure, like, it was actually beyond my time. I'm actually just 20 years old. Unfortunately, I didn't get the liberty to watch that as I was growing up. I only discovered Bob Ross later on. However, wow, he was just phenomenal. Not only was he a great artist, but it was also amazing to see how he tied a story into his artwork. You got to see the process of him going from a blank canvas to a masterpiece, and he would guide you along the way. That in itself, the documentation, the showcasing of the creation of the art, that, like I said, is art in itself, and it's something that we can get to appreciate. So if you're worried about the whole practicing in public thing, you can also document, your whole journey of getting better. You can say, hey guys, in today's video, this is day 1 of me learning how to do so and so. I mean, who's gonna hate that? And actually, to tie this all off, this brings me to my final point that I want to speak on. And that is the people who are at the peak or the summit of the mountain that you're trying to climb. They can't hate you for wanting to climb up and scale up yourself. Why? Because they will recognize your efforts, because they were once in your position as well. Going back to what I just said, who's going to hate that? Hey guys, this is me in my channel, or in this video I'm doing so and so, and this is just day 1 of me focusing on how to improve XYZ. Who's going to hate that? The only people that will hate that are the people who, unless it's genuine criticism that you have to have thick skin to take, you should be able to handle the constructive criticism. It's not bad, it's actually good, because you might recognize flaws that you never saw. But if it's not that and it's just pure hate, just pay it no mind. The real ones who are actually in the position that you're trying to get up to yourself, they won't hate. If I'm asking for advice from a millionaire, right, on how to make my first 10,000 Rand or $10,000, he can't hate. He's gonna actually, if he has time, of course, he's going to showcase his skills. He's going to showcase, okay, when I was in your position, I did so and so. And he can't, a lot of the times the people in the positions that we're trying to reach, they're not going to disregard our efforts, because they recognize that, that mountain that we're trying to scale up, it's not an easy summit. A lot of times they'll appreciate the hard work, the determination. So you have nothing to fear. Go ahead and begin. Go ahead and drop that song. Go ahead and, start that business. Go ahead and delve into that venture that you wanted to begin. I'm hoping that all of these things that I've mentioned will give you a better perception on why it's okay to begin. And even if you aren't perfect as you are, it's always best to start, because you get experience. Just to reiterate some of the concepts that we looked at, right? Firstly, it was the quote from Jack Harlow. Don't wait, you're telling yourself that you're waiting for the perfect time. I'm butchering this quote. Forgive me, Jack, please. But you're telling yourself it just takes time. However, the time is now. Stop waiting for the inspiration. Remember, with that, we mentioned that the perfect moment doesn't exist. You have the power to go ahead and create that moment for yourself, right? So that's that. Then with the second key thing that we looked at, it was the thing of the green lights, okay? That you saying, okay, I want this perfect moment to come, is as similar, it's basically the same as you saying you're waiting for your journey from your starting point to your final destination, and you're hoping for all those lights to be green. A very narrow window you have. So if those are the odds that you want to play with, go ahead, be my guest. And then the final 2 points of the showcase, the display of the creation of art as art itself. You can document your process, you can document your journey, something that's also very important. And then the final thing, the fourth concept that I wanted to look at, of the mountain, the peak, the climb, the grind. The people who are at the peak of the summit that you're trying to get to, or let me not say peak of the summit, it's the same thing, but the people who are at the peak or the summit of the mountain that you're trying to climb will not push you down. They were once in your position, so they'll recognize your efforts. I'm hoping that with these 4 main concepts, it gives you a better perception, a better view on why you should actually go ahead and just start now. Don't overthink it too much. You are allowed to get better as you progress. We are human. We don't have to have all the answers figured out. And just one final point, I have to practice what I preach. I'm a firm believer in that. And that's what I'm doing myself with this video. I want to improve on my public speaking skills. And as much as I know this is YouTube, I can edit the little parts, I can, edit out my stuttering, I can edit out the mistakes. I'm not going to do that. Because if I'm speaking in front of a crowd in real life, I don't have the opportunity to just, oh guys, forget that, it didn't exist. Or let me just edit out this part where I messed up my words. No, I have to find a way to get back on track. I have to find a way to find my words again, my thoughts, and carry on with my initial train of thought and make sure that I deliver the message correctly. So yeah, don't get me wrong. Although I did public speaking in school, in high school, I really want to improve much further in this. And so this is just my take on it as well. So even if everything I've said, if you still won't take majority of the concepts I've said, at least take this. I'm doing it myself. I have my flaws. And if you've made it to this part of the video, I really appreciate that. But it just goes to show that even though I displayed many of my flaws throughout the entire video, my stuttering, my mistakes, you still made it through. Why? Because you recognize that I'm human. I make mistakes. People will recognize that in you as well. So you don't have to beat yourself up for the little mistakes. You don't have to beat yourself up for not being perfect. You don't have to beat yourself up for not knowing enough. Just go ahead and start. That's just some food for thought. Thank you.